Hey everyone, welcome to the Beyond the X and O's podcast, where we discuss mindset and leadership within the world of sports. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassidy Preston, mental performance coach and founder of CP Mindset, and Chris DiPiero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in my junior days. And now we work together in the mental performance and leadership space. Chris, it's a new season of Behind the X and O's. I'm excited to dive in. We've got lots to cover. We're really talking more mindset, mental game, particularly diving into different concepts in my upcoming book titled Mindset First. How are you doing? It's been a while since we recorded an episode and getting them back out to the listeners.
Things are great, Cass. Appreciate it. And yeah, congratulations on the book. Certainly it's, I know in having delved into it, people who do have a chance to purchase it and get it and read it. And I think they're going to be, they're going to have a lot of nuggets to take away to help them, whether they're coaches, parents, athletes. I think that's fantastic. So congratulations on that. Yeah, things are good on my end. My summer's been going well. A lot of reading myself and just trying to get better and trying to do continual research. And looking forward to this season of Beyond the X and O. Should be a great one.
Yeah, we've got lots of great guests already lined up. We're hammering a bunch of recordings here at the end of the summer here. And today we're obviously diving into the intro of the first one, which is actually one of my former or actually current clients. And I have somebody I've worked with for over 4 years now. That's Domenic DiVincentiis. He's a prospect with the Winnipeg Jets, currently plays for the North Bay Battalion, and definitely been working with him as he's climbed the ranks. And one of the main reasons I wanted to dive in with him was because he's really learned how to personalize his mental game to work for him. And we're going to dive into some of the biggest lessons, particularly that helped him this past year become OHL Goalie of the Year, and then just recently signed his entry-level deal with the Winnipeg Jets. So one of the things that I like, and I know this one I kept it pretty tight, short, just me and him did it one-on-one, and you weren't able to attend. And then that way you've listened and enjoyed the recording already. But one of my biggest takeaways is like how he was able to grow from what it was a big adversity this past year and use that to help him really develop that next shot mentality, let go of the perfectionism, some big key things, let go of the fear of mistakes. What are some of your takeaways before we dive into this episode?
Well, what I liked about it was just, his willingness to share some of the adversities that he's worked through, and obviously worked through with you, and being able to get him to the place he's at. And I think that first and foremost. Secondly, was I was really struck by his maturity about this process and how this process has allowed him to have success. So he's recognizing that he's prioritized his mindset, and that. Yeah, I'm sure, every goalie wants to be goaltender of the year, but he's kind of prioritized that mindset, which then allowed him to achieve, results that he may not have wanted, or not necessarily wanted, but not necessarily thought he would achieve ultimately, but he did. So the process before the results, and then, as you said, he signed his entry-level deal, which is never guaranteed. So good for him that he was able to do that. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, a couple other unique specifics, and encourage you to listen all the way through. His ability to separate his why from his goals and intent, which we talk about a lot, but then here's an actual athlete talking about how he's done that and uses it, dealing with the overthinking and not trying to, as a goalie or any athlete, trying to predict the results, but instead stay present. And particularly the use of his personal scorecard talks about, the process, tangibly on the field of play on the ice, but as well as his mental state as this 5 key things that he's just hammering in over and over. And then other little things like his ability to be laser focused and deal with different adversities that have come up. So lots of great takeaways. Any final thoughts before we let the listeners dive in?
No, I think it's great. It's great for anybody listening in terms of, like you say, athletes, parents, coaches. I think just in terms of, listening to a high performing athlete, talk about his mindset and his mental performance.
Make sure you like, subscribe, reach out with any questions. Obviously, you're interested in mental performance coaching, for teams, coaches, athletes, reach out, find us at cpmindset.com, and enjoy the episode as we keep going beyond the X's and O's. All right, Dom, thanks for joining. Happy to have you on the podcast here. Obviously, you just signed with Winnipeg, so congrats again. Maybe just start off with a brief summary of like your journey, how we started working together, your journey as a hockey player, where you are now, where you're going, that kind of idea.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, I got to meet you 4 years ago now, or just under 4 years that we've been working together. Completely changed the way my mindset is on and off the ice, and the way I am as a person and as an athlete. So thank you for helping me out with that. But my journey started when I was 5. Started playing hockey, started realizing that I wanted to play the sport and how much I loved it. And it's carried on since then. I started being a goaltender at around 6 years old. And it's carried on throughout the years that, like, I love the sport, and my dream was to make it to the NHL one day and have a successful career. And I think it was down in minor midget in my final year of minor hockey. I had a lot of ups and downs throughout my season there, and I felt like things weren't necessarily going the way I wanted them to go entering the OHL draft. And so I've obviously found yourself, and we started working together, and it allowed me to really shape the way I am as a goaltender and change the way that I play. And when I say that, it comes down to, as a goaltender, it's a lot of mental. It's a lot of mental preparation, being able to take the heat for games. And at the same time, it's about how you can mentally motivate yourself to, the positives as well. When you have a good game one night, then you're playing it back-to-back the next night. How can you take the positives from that game and kind of put them to the side for the next game and just restart the next day? So for me, it really changed the way I am as a goaltender, and thank you to yourself for that.
Well, pleasure. And it's been fun to work together. I know, credit to you. You dive in, do the work, you're dedicated, you're on the calls, you're doing the work in between, which is, a big part of the benefit on your mindset, mental game. I always like it to get some of the other players in the league, like, oh, that guy's laser focused out there. So it gets noticed. And so one of the things, just to let's dive into your mindset, your mental game, the biggest things you've got that you applied yourself, because it's always nice to get the narrative and the story. What would you say your biggest shift has been, the biggest benefit to your mindset, what you do differently now than before you started working, together and working into your mental game? Does anything pop out when I ask you that?
Yeah. For me, it's really like I said before, it's how you enter games and how you mentally prepare yourself each and every night for a battle, and as well as how you go into your practices. For me, the biggest thing that changed was going into my games. Like, I used to be over focused and overthink, how the game's going to go and what the results are going to be. But when I started working with you and we got on those calls weekly, it allowed me to change my mindset to worrying about maybe one or two things that I got to focus on in that game, and not worrying about results, but focusing on the process. And I think that's the biggest thing for me was it's be focused on the process, not results. And that's how you're going to get to that next level. And that's how you're going to be able to succeed. For me in my career, is not worrying about how games are going to go, because the best thing about hockey is there's always going to be another game. Yeah. So if you're constantly worrying about the outcomes of the games, and then you lose and you put that extra pressure on yourself, it's just going to be a snowball effect as you move forward. So the biggest thing for me was not thinking about too much before the game, keeping calm, keeping perspective of what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, you can only control the controllables. So for me, the outcome isn't the controllable that I can control. It's really about what I'm thinking pre and during the game, and not focusing about getting too ahead of myself of what's going to happen. It's just focusing on that next shot and that next save mentality. So I think really the biggest thing for me was my mindset shift in the way of focusing on the process, not results.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, I remember back, the weight of the results, the expectations, the need tos, the shoulds, it weighs on so many athletes, and so many athletes struggle. It's kind of common sense. A lot of people are focused on the controllables, focused on the process, but then able to make it common practice. And I think you've done a really good job of that. And I don't know if maybe you just want to dive a little deeper on the evolution of that, because obviously you bought in quickly, and I think got results pretty quickly, but then have kept doing the work. And it's not like there's not been bumps along the ways or times where the results kind of weigh in on you or you're overthinking again before games. It's this constant, never ending thing because the allure of results and the pull to try to predict and get caught up on the results and the things out of your control is always there. And as you keep rising the ranks, the obstacles are getting shinier and bigger and the allure. Maybe just want to speak to that because I think that's important for other athletes to hear on your journey, just being able to keep detaching, letting go of that weight of the results.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always going to be bumps in the road. It's never going to be just a climb up. There's always going to be ups and downs. And really, that's the other thing that I learned a lot of is how to deal with adversity. And that's the one thing that, you know, as a goaltender, like I mentioned before, a lot of people weigh on you, on the goaltenders, to be perfect. And that's the one thing that, you know, you don't need to be. You don't need to be perfect. No one is perfect in this world. So for me, that's it's understanding how to battle that and how to succeed when getting that adversity. And like you mentioned, you just because you talk about it or you do the work doesn't mean that it's just going to be an uphill from there. There's always going to be things pulling you down. There's always going to be things weighing on you. But it's about the learning process of it. It's how you could learn from your mistakes to make them better, not make them perfect, but make them better. So for me, there's still plenty of things that I, you know, overthink, like going into a playoff game. It's a game 7. You feel the pressure, you feel the excitement. You know that you got to expect that there's going to be goals that go in. But it's not about thinking about this is a game where it's a winner or it's a do or die game and what's going to happen after the 60 minutes and how many goals am I going to let in? Am I going to go home tonight or am I going to keep playing tomorrow? So it's really about just focusing on all the previous games in that season of how I learned from my mistakes and make them better. And it allowed me to, you know, I played in 2 game 7 games this year in the playoffs. Both were, one was we ended up playing the next round. The other one was we went home. And at the end of the day, it's out of my control with how the results go. So just for me, it was a lot about, you know, there's going to be ups and downs. You do go into those games thinking tonight's a do or die game, but it's about how you can manage that when you enter that ice and enter the first second of the game. It's push it to the side and let the game go and let the game play. And really that's the biggest thing is it's not going to be a smooth ride just because you do the homework or you know, get on a 15-20 minute call with Dr. Cassidy, but it's about learning that these are all little things that you learn in your toolbox and how you can apply them so that later on in your career, you know how to battle that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the taking, because a lot of times people's like, oh yeah, we get like have a growth mindset, keep learning and growing at like the technical and our physical part, but we got to take the same approach to our mindset and our mental game, and that there's bumps along the way. You got to keep doing the work, not looking for the quick fix. So one thing you alluded to there that I wanted to bring up and touch on is like dealing with the adversity and the setbacks. And one of the things that I thought was, you know, really interesting of this past year, obviously, you know, the signing with Winnipeg, there's OHL goalie of the year, you know, lots of results, stats, all this external stuff. But one of, I thought, was a cool moment in the year was actually a big adversity and the 8-goal against game late in the season. And we talked about the standing with the bats analogy. And I thought you had already done a good job. You're processing it. You weren't beating yourself up after it. It was just a result. And then afterwards, then he went flying down the stretch and had like 3 shutouts the next 6 games, etc., and winning goalie of the year and all this stuff. But to me, I look back at that and I was like, that's an important moment where I think that's like a grit building moment. That's a moment where it helped you stand with the goals against and not fear them. Can you maybe, so that's my interpretation. I want to get kind of an opportunity to share, looking back at the season and looking back at the evolution of your mindset. Does that moment stick out to you? What do you remember? How important is it for you in moving forward in your career?
Yeah, I mean, obviously no one likes 8-goal game as a goalie.
Sorry to bring it up again. I won't bring it up again after this.
But no, in all seriousness, it's happened to me twice in my career now where, well, I'm sure it's happened more, but my OHL career, it's happened once in my first year in the OHL and once this year. And it's something that, you know what, you learn from, and you actually take away the benefits of that. Obviously things like prior to that game, it was a lot of ups and downs through that. And then it felt like, you know, that 8-goal game was hard. It crashed. And all of a sudden, how do you battle through that? And how do you get kicking again? And how do you get going uphill now? And I think really that 8-goal game actually allowed me to realize, like you mentioned, how to not be scared about goals going in. How do you not worry about, you know, goals going in, but how do you actually take those and now say, I battled through an 8-goal game, 1 or 2 goals now isn't going to be a big deal. And so it's really about, like you said, staying with the bats and allowing that to allowing myself to realize that there's going to be stuff that happen in a game. And how do you keep moving forward? How do you keep staying in that crease and you know, giving your team the best chance to win that game? And, you know, there's games where they end up being 8-2 in the third period, and all of a sudden it's an 8-8 game. And now the goal is all of a sudden the hero of the game. Yeah. So it's a lot about that. You can't overthink it. And that's the biggest thing for me was that I learned is in that 8-goal game, how do you stay in that crease? You know, it's 8-2 in the third period with 15 minutes left. How do you keep that an 8-goal game and not let it go to a 9 or 10? So I think for me, it's just staying in that moment, you know, forget about what the scoreboard says. It just restart, refresh, and keep moving forward from there. And right after that, like you mentioned, it was three shutouts in 5 games or 6 games right after that one game and where I had 8 goals against. And I think the biggest thing was I got on my call the next day and we talked about staying with those bats and not fearing goals, because I am a goalie. Goals are going to go in. Stuff's going to happen in a game. You might get a bad goal against and everyone is blaming the goalie. But after that, it's about how do you keep your structure? How do you keep your confidence up and not fear goals, but focus on that next shot, next save mentality? And I think that was for me, the biggest thing was in my head or in the crease. I'm always saying to myself, okay, they're coming down. Now let's focus on the save. Let's make this save. And then you restart every time they come down. And it was 3 shutouts, and it made me realize that, you know what, just because these 3 shutouts come, now I can't get focused on, you know, 0 goals against and how perfect, because it could be very easy to see 3 shutouts out of my 5 games, 3 shutouts, and now be like, get a goal against, and you're just like all broken down that you let yourself down. And that was the thing where I talked to you about it after. I think it was my second shutout, and it's like, don't be result focused now. Stick with the process, stick with not being scared about goals, but understand that goals will go in and keep moving forward from there. And I think that really allowed me to succeed even throughout playoffs where you're playing almost every other night. How do you keep that same mindset throughout every game for 3-4 rounds? And I did a very good job at that, because I allowed myself to think about that moment where I let in 8 goals and how I still stuck with myself even after that game and just went back to practice, got back down to the basics and kept on moving forward from there.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. And a couple cool things, and just to loop in the listeners, the Sandra Kamphoff actually did a good study, and she talked about it, where he's like, you look at really gritty, resilient people. It's like, where did this grit come from? It comes from dealing with adversity. And so, you know, I won't doubt in 5 years from now, you're still looking back and probably remember that game or that moment. And that's one of a benefit that helps you move forward. And for those that don't understand the stand with the bat analogy, the quick of it is, think of Batman. He's afraid of bats. Well, what does he do? He learns to stand with the bats. He embraces it, becomes just part of who he is. And that's a superpower. So as a goalie, I think you embrace that idea of like, if I'm going to be a goalie, I'm going to be able to stand with the goals against. Otherwise, like, that's what I signed up for. And some days there's a lot of bats, there's a lot of goals against, and you had 8 goals against and you're still standing, and you're still owning your capabilities. You're still fighting through it. Just kept moving forward. And so great example. One of the things I want to shift towards is some of the strategies, particularly, and you talked about it, like, keep focused on my process. We call it like the personal scorecard, but you had like your 5 things. You're pretty consistent with that, you know, mindset related and process related. what you can talk about that strategy, reset routine, alter ego, they're all matter imagery. Which strategies for you have been most impactful that you lean on, you find keep you centered, grounded, moving forward the best?
For me, I use the reset routine. I use the 5 key things that I need to focus on, and I use the red line.
Nice.
Those 3 things were the biggest things for me mentally throughout the season that I embraced and that I use on a daily basis. So I'll give a quick little thing of what each means. So the reset routine is for me during every stoppage of play in the games. I take a deep breath in, like with my eyes, I close my eyes, take a deep breath and breathe out. And it allows me to reset, restart. It's a fresh start, no matter what it is, even if I make a big save. And now it's getting ready for the face-off. It's a quick deep breath in, out, and get back to it. Forget about that save, like deal with it later. Now, goals against, same thing. Goals against, goal goes in, they go in a center ice for face-off. It's a quick breathe in, breathe out, reset, stay with the bats. Don't be scared of that goal. Now watch the big screen, see what you could have done, and let it go from there. It's over. It's in the past. Now you focus on that next shot, next save mentality. And then my 5 key things were 5 key things that I myself believe I need to focus on in that game. So for me, it was, holding my depth when they're skating and when they're coming into the zone, holding my depth, squaring up on my angles, keeping my right and left leg up, help me square up, playing the puck, making sure that I'm alert of what play needs to be done, whether it's going to go to the D, whether it's going to be a rim, whether it's a quick up, a leave it, like whatever the situation is, got to make sure I'm sharp on that. Another one is playing big, like making sure I'm looking over screens, not getting low, not getting wide. Shots are at the point. How do you stay big? Make sure I'm looking over that screen. And the other one was making sure I'm set off of face-offs. Teams all have plays now off face-offs, making sure that I do my video pre-game so that I know what play is going to be done right off that face-off, and making sure that I already know what it is, making sure I'm set on that face-off to make that save. And so those were the 5 things that, I do in my practices for that month to make sure that I'm ready for the games that I'm called upon. And then the last one is the green, blue, and red line. So the blue line is the process. The green line is the things that I need to work on. So those 5 key things that I just mentioned it's more of like the
physical process versus the mental process is blue. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's more that I need to do. The blue is more the mental side of things. And then the red line is is like the last thing in the scale, which is like the result, like the, getting the win, making sure that there's like 2 goals against, which is something that I don't even think about going into a game. The red line, it's more just green and blue line that I focus on going into game, but red line is something I focus on in that month of practices, how to, set a goal for myself. I play 4 games, win 3 out of the 4 games, get goalie of the month. Like that's a red line for me. Every month was that, but that's not something I focus on during the games. It's more of just like the preparation to a game. Yeah. So those were 3 big things that I took away from this year and that I used on a daily basis for myself. And that goes practices as well. Like the process of practice, like there's times that, it's a practice. So I want to focus on squaring up on my right and left side, for example. And, there's going to be goals that go in on practice too, but it's about how you can, reset and get back into that practice mode. Forget about the results, forget about the way practice went, just focus on what you need to focus on for that day. And that it's same goes for the games as they do in practice. And that's how, you're going to be better in a game, is by learning how to manage that in practice as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, we're big advocates of that blue, green, red, because like the foundation is like, who do you want to be today? And I know often when you use those 5 things, we often even label things green and blue. You have a handful of green things, process things that you're doing. You listed some of those, and the mindset, like next shot mentality and gearing down, laser and focusing through distractions. So and the problem that most athletes are doing, which, I think you've done a good job. And like the first thing we talked about, the allure of results, is you get the game day. It's like, all right, red. It's like, all right, I want to focus. I got to get the red. So I got to do the green to get the red. I got to focus on the process so I can get red, and I got to get blue, the right mindset so I can do the things well. Well, that's backwards. If you prioritize and your attention and focus and priorities are on red, the blue and the green will suffer. And what we want to have instead is a really clear, 5 things or a personal scorecard or a little list that you then engage with before and after. This is what matters to me. This is what my game is about. This is what I'm dialed in on. And we changed yours, you changed yours throughout the year, but never like a ton. It's like, I have 5 new ones this week. It's like maybe a couple minor things, and different variations and understanding things a little deeper. Yeah. But I think that's such a foundational thing. So I'm glad you brought that up, and they tie in and work together. A couple more things here, just to, be mindful of your time too, is around, I know laser focus, double down, like gearing through distractions has been something you really dialed into. You think of like the alter ego concept and this narrative of like, there's distractions coming in, whether the results, social media, expectations, and cutting through the noise to keep you focused on those 5 things. But how well would you maybe talk about like that ability to, or those concepts or principles of like committed to your game and not getting caught up and distracted and moving your attention and focus away from the task at hand and getting caught up in the shiny objects? How important has that been for you this past year? Because I know it definitely, we talked about it a fair bit. Where's that ranking from a concept standpoint?
Oh, well, we talked about that a lot. And I mean, that's something that ties pretty much everything into the game. Playing in an away rink where fans are on you, fans are, trying to get you off your game, people on the ice chirping you. How do you stay away from that noise and just keep laser focus in the game? And that's something that we talked about a lot, like gearing up at the end of periods, like making sure that, the last minute and a half of that period, we try to shut it down, get into that intermission, clean sheet, we're good to go. Laser focus, like being dialed in on that puck at all times. Like don't listen to the outside noise. Don't listen to people chirping. Like focus on what you got to do and that next shot, next save mentality. And that's kind of where it ties into each other, is something like that. For example, of like focus on that next shot, next save mentality while being laser focused on the game and on the puck. The other one was like, like I said, with the doubling down, like gearing up at the start of end of periods, is for time in this season, I had a problem where, in the last 2 minutes of the game or of the period, I would let in a goal. And that kind of drains the team going into the next period, is now down a goal, or the other team's got momentum now. So it's about how to, focus on that, like last minute, 2 minutes, that period that you're shutting it down completely and not focusing on the results, but focusing on like those 5 things that I got to worry about, or that mindset, like that green line or the blue line. It's how like that as well ties into gearing up at the start of end of periods. And so that's how I really use my my mindset, is making sure everything that I talk about or everything that we talk about on a weekly basis ties into each other. So it's not thinking about 50 different things during a game, but it's thinking about 5 things while tying it into the other couple things that we talk about, right? Yeah. So it's not about overwhelming yourself with so many different things that you need to worry about and focus on and this and that, because you do have a game that you have to worry about as well, which is very big. But it's about how you can minimize everything so that your mindset's just focused on those certain things. But it's like playing a trick on yourself. Yeah. It's you're thinking about those 5 things, but your mind really knows that it ties down to the green and blue lines, or gearing up at the start of end of periods, or laser focused. But really those 5 key things are those green and blue lines. Yeah. And I think really what helped me was not focusing on so many things, but minimizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to keep a very simple focus, and a good example too. You allude to like the goals against near. We want to, like, if there's a moment of impact, is what I often call that. It's like, hey, there's like the end of periods for you. Sometimes you're like, oh no, it's the end of a period, and then a goal again, and now you're starting to. It's like, no, actually double down. I'm like let me lean into the end of periods and embrace that, and make sure I activate the mentality and make that a priority. And so that was a good example of using it. So glad you brought that up. Okay, last main thing. One of the things we talked a lot about as well, and this is probably less to do with at or during games and more for before, and blocking out the noise before, which is like separating, which I think you've done a pretty good job, separating why you play the game and the intrinsic drivers and the enjoyment, like you mentioned at the beginning, back to like 5-6 years old. And that origin story we've talked about, like when you first fell in love, versus what your goals and your intentions are, and keeping those things separate. Because when you start to think your why and you're driven by just the results, the red line, things start to falter. And so keeping those things separate, how well would you say you've done that? How important is that for you? How would you put that in your own words?
I mean, personally, I think I did a very good job at that. Like that we talk about at the beginning or pre-season. It's about why you play this game. So anybody that really gets in this game that has an end goal, the way you get to that end goal is through the process. And that process started when you started hockey. So for me at 5 years old, why I played this game, like I mentioned before, is I fell in love with the game. It doesn't have anything to do with the money of what you receive, like, your first paycheck. It doesn't have to do with where you end up playing. It had to do with genuinely falling in love with the game and just enjoy playing the game. And it puts you in like a happy place. And for me, that's really what's allowed me to, sign with the Jets and get drafted to the NHL and hopefully one day play in the NHL. It's about that process since I was 5. Because when I was 5 years old, if anyone would have asked me if I would have been drafted and signed to the NHL, I would probably said you're crazy. But how you start at that age and you understand that going into each game for me was just go out there and have fun. Like, don't worry about the scouts in the stands. Don't worry about what people are thinking of you or what the criticism you're going to receive after the game if you lose a game, or don't worry about that stuff. Just go out there, have fun, play your game. Make sure you're focusing on those 5 things that I talk about, and whatever happens. Go out there, have fun, enjoy yourself, because you know what? The love of the game, of why I started playing the game, is what's gotten me here. Mm-hmm. So it really comes down to that, where if anybody is really playing the game, it's because they love it, not because of where they're going to end up in the end of their career. And for me, it allows me to keep pushing and motivates me to, think about when I was 5 years old and used to strap on street hockey gear when the Leafs were playing on TV. Like, It's just, that's what I think about of me being that kid, of why I play this game. And now I'm going to actually do that live in front of 7,000 people. So enjoy, embrace the moment, have fun out there, and do your best.
Yeah. I love that. That was beautifully said, Dom. Final thoughts, anything you want to say, like what you would say to your younger self, what you would say to any players out there interested in working on their mindset, climbing the ranks? Any final thoughts? Your plug, we want people to go check out online or anything. You got social presence. I'm not always the most up to date on that stuff, but you can also plug anything like that. Any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think to my younger self, I would say getting into mental performance was the best thing that's really happened in my career. What's really allowed me to get to where I am today is getting into working with yourself and, getting myself prepared at the beginning of seasons and setting goals for myself. That's really what, sorry about the noise, but to my younger self, that's really what I would say is get into mental performance as fast as you can, because that'll help you as your career goes on. And I think for me, going to other people is like, if you're really dedicated to the sport, you understand that the sport is pretty much all mental. and how you can manage the adversity and the negativity. And, you know, when things aren't going your way, that all comes down to mental performance and being able to have that strong mindset, just like you would physically go to the gym or go on the ice for practice, or with a skills coach, whatever it is. It's the same thing that you're doing there, but for your mind. And I think that's really the biggest thing, is understanding that you're not going to a mental performance coach just to, you know, say you went to a more mental performance coach and that's it. You're genuinely going there and doing the homework for it, like you would do away like on the ice. So, you know, going, let's say for myself, like doing hand-eye coordination in the basement. Like I know I have to do that, so I'm gonna do it. But I know that I gotta also do mental performance. So I'm gonna make sure I take the time to write notes and you know, do meditation, stuff like that, to make sure that I'm ready. And it's the same exact thing. So for anyone that's really dedicated to the sport, I'd suggest, you know, listening to Dr. Cassidy and getting in touch with him or a mental performance coach.
Awesome. Much appreciated, Dom. Thanks so much for joining. We'll chat again soon. All right, buddy?
Yeah. Thank you for having me.